I've always seen style as not just something nice that adds a bit to life, but it's something that is really central to where we are at and central to how we see and can understand what's changing in our world. So instead of just a kind of add-on, frivolous, nice thing, to me it's a key tool to, for example, understanding history. I was born in 1947. My new book is called Boom, A Baby Boomer Memoir, 1947 to 2022. And yes, it plots the coming and going of presidents, because I was born in America, but then moved to England, to Britain in 1969. And I've been here ever since. So yes, my book tells about the presidents changing, the prime ministers changing, but the real story, and I think the real story for all of us, is the style changes, which are so symbolic and so central to the way the world went, and the way the world is, and the way the world is going. In 1960, my father took me to a local cheap but cheerful department store called Fisher's. This was in Neptune, New Jersey. I was a teenager. My father's idea of a good suit, he'd been in the war, a good suit to my father had big, big lapels, fancy buttons, a sort of more is more presumption that if you've got it, and my father didn't, he was a truck driver, but he wanted to be proud of his appearance, he presumed that if you went out and bought a suit, that you'd want to buy something flash, with big lapels, a lot of fabric used. But this is 1960, the same year that we see the first series of Mad Men, for example. Think about Don Draper. Tight, neat, modern style suit, prefigured by the wonderful figure of Rod Serling, the presenter of The Twilight Zone, who I think was the real model for Don Draper. Here you have the idea of coming out of cool jazz, and what in Britain would be known as mod, which is a kind of less is more aesthetic. Everything, I mean, this tie, I mean, this suit is sort of reminiscent. It marks my coming full circle back to the beginning, but it's a bit different. These lapels are a bit wider. My tie would have been, yes, the shirt would have been buttoned down, very trim, tidy like that, but the tie would have been as thin as the line on a Mondrian painting. And you had a tie clip worn down here, which was silver, and over the same width as the tie, which is not more than about that. And tie would have been cut off square at the bottom. And all very neat and trim. And I knew I wanted a suit like this, so my father takes me, and he can't understand why this appeals to me. He thinks I'm making a mistake. It wasn't all that expensive. I mean, it was a cheaper version of what Don Draper would be wearing, a much cheaper version. It was very tight, whereas my father's idea of a suit is baggy and loose. And my father sort of cut me down to size and embarrassed me thoroughly by scanning over the thing, and particularly the tight fit on the crotch. He said, "Everybody can see everything you've got," which was devastating, but I wanted that suit. And I got the suit. And I was so proud of the suit, and I thought I'd like to become a modern jazz pianist, but that didn't work out. Then I thought I'd become a kind of modern painter. This is a long time ago. Now here's the important thing, is when people think about the 60s, you have to realize the 60s are like 2 decades rolled into one. 2 for the price of 1. You've got that sort of Don Draper, Mad Men, cool school, modern jazz, Miles Davis. Remember, Miles Davis brings, at 1950, he brings out the record Birth of the Cool. the 20th century is divided into two parts, precisely. There's the hot half. Anything good is hot. She's a hot woman, you've got hot jazz. And then suddenly, the temperature cools, and instead of wanting to be hot, a hot tomato, which is a sexy woman, or hot jazz, Louis Armstrong, New Orleans jazz, now you want to be cool. So the second half of the 20th century is dominated by cool, which is still with us. We have cool hunters today, but in 1950 and 1960, the first half of the 60s is dedicated to cool. And it's dedicated to modernism and to futurism, and machines are going to improve everything. And a sexiness, Playboy magazine is with us. Furniture is contemporary, squared. The movement is away from decoration towards simplicity, abstraction in painting. All of these things go together to give us a first 60s, cool school 60s. And then in 1966, 1967, I'm a student in Temple University in Philadelphia. And somehow I go from my cool school into my hippie self. Now, this would have not been from 67. This is talking about 69, but probably what I had in 67 was not that far removed. You've got the flares down here. I notice these are not like Levi's. There's not even any label in it. I mean, it amazes me how today everything is all about like labels and brands. But both in the early 60s, you weren't so much looking to impress with your brand or even how much money you had. You were looking to impress with your sense of style. Certainly by the hippie days, if it had a big brand label on it, you wouldn't have been interested in it at all. And you wanted to show that it was like worn and frazzled. So we go from cool school 60s in a flash, 1965, 1966, into this other version of the 60s, which is hippie, which is Woodstock, which is let it all hang out, and which is certainly not minimal. I mean, everything is decorated. Here's my hand-woven headband to keep my long, I mean, the hair would have been down to here. But this stylistic, my point is that this stylistic change marks the fact that the world has changed so profoundly and changed in a flash between 1965, 1966, and then 1967. By 1969, wearing these jeans, probably even wearing this headband, I come over to Britain originally to work as an archaeologist in Winchester, and this is what I look like when I get off the plane. And this is what I would be looking like for the next few years until another revolution sets in with glam.